Ladies and gentlemen, we have an exciting session to conclude our first day at Rotation Expo 2024. As generations are shifting, the concept of home is not just a place to stay, but a place that reflects their identity and lifestyle. Join us, Architectural Insights, Designing for the Future, where we delve into the crucial role of architecture in today's real estate, led by our esteemed moderator, Michaela Menicu, Chartered Architect, Associate Professor, Head of Department of Architecture at University of Nicosia. Michaela and my dear speakers, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me well? Okay, thank you for joining us to this event. I am Markela, and with me today in this panel, we have my esteemed colleagues, Maria Charalambidis, co-founder and partner of Epidesser Architects, Marios Christodoulidis, founder of Sympraxis Architects, and Konstantinos Vasiliadis, architect of Vasiliadis Architects and academic at Neapolis University Paphos. Before we start, kindly inherent in the title of the discussion, I just wanted to mention that Architectural Insights, Designing for the Future, will actually bring about a very different discussion to the previous panels you've attended today. It will be less factual, less graspable. We will try to touch upon more theoretical concepts that are important in understanding the way we inhabit our planet. So, it's a very open-ended discussion, so we'll try to frame it as much as possible in line with the interests of the panelists, emphasize some local conditions, and speculate about the future. So, let's go. Let's try and keep our responses short so we can discuss an array of subjects. I will direct my first question to Marios. Mario, the majority of buildings in Cyprus, as we know them, are constructed really for a specific purpose, what we architects understand as a specified program. However, it is evident that there is a current trend and a future need for flexible and multifunctional spaces. Is there a benefit in designing flexible spaces that allow not only for cross-programming, but also for user appropriation?
I think essentially what you're referring to is multi-use developments in a way, which is, globally it's a great tool that's been used extensively in bigger markets to essentially regenerate parts of cities that are neglected in a way. And the way to do that essentially is to basically combine different uses together. And these could include housing, they could include retail, commercial, and also services. When I say services, I mean things like schools or care for elderly or kindergartens or things that actually people use and things that actually keep people within the realm of the city. Obviously, these are projects that are projects of a bigger scale than what we're used to here in Cyprus. And they're not necessarily confined to a single plot, which makes it even more difficult to implement them here in Cyprus, because we don't have the planning expertise to do that yet. But I think if these projects are done successfully, I think they can create a pretty successful sense of community. And, we have some really good examples of that. And besides that, they can actually regenerate parts of the city that have been neglected. And I guess essentially they can encourage interactions between people from different walks of life.
Okay. Thank you, Marius. Maria, continuing on the same subject, really, just to sort of introduce you to the conversation. Is there something preventing us from doing so locally, what Marius just explained? I'm referring both to new build projects, but also reusing, adaptive reuse of existing building stock. Does it work?
Does it work? Do you hear me? Hi. Nobody's preventing us. And it's up to us as architects to implement our designs from the beginning. First, we have the regulations. This is a huge obstacle, but we can enrich the design and the buildings from the beginning. Let me give you an example. For big projects, multi-use projects, or unified residential projects over 5,000 square meters, you are allowed to implement the project with gyms, lounge areas, working spaces, small restaurants as facilities for the end user. And given that the sense of community, as Marius said correctly, to interact with each other. I strongly believe that this must become obligatory by law, even in smaller buildings. What I mean, let's put the parking spaces on basement and have the ground area, as we're used to in small buildings, with the entrance and facilities for all the owners or residents or whatever. So it's up to us.
It's up to us, obviously, I agree. Perhaps I was referring to also a slightly different concept, which is not just combining, let's say, different facilities or programs together in parallel, but allow spaces to be appropriated and shift between programs. For example, I don't know, a public building serving as something else on a different time schedule. But I think that's an extension of what you've just mentioned. And just to tie it back to the existing building stock, which is a consideration of ours in Cyprus at the moment, Constantino, if you were to introduce such strategies, especially of adaptive reuse, as we call it, and this kind of cross-programming, could that help foster, let's say, a circular economy ethos in the architectural realm?
Yes, this is the answer, actually. The point is to have a holistic approach to design. We need to understand that at some point, as Mario said, all the buildings are going to be multifunctional, or they will need to work as multifunctional. And this is the approach by us. This is the approach that architects need to have in all of the aspects of this subject. For example, for the reuse of materials or the reuse of structures. For example, containers, building with containers with this approach of reuse or whatever, or any other ideas. The use of local materials to recycle, let's say, or reuse the same materials that used in the past are used again without exploiting or without spending a lot of much of energy in order to put them together. And of course, this approach is not only on us as architects. And of course, this approach needs to be the same for all of the factors, all of the stakeholders in a building, from the architect to the constructor to the user himself.
Okay, thank you. Sorry? Okay, so back to Marius. Let's bring into the discussion some current trends in living and working environments. And we cannot ignore the exponential rising costs lately, both living and working environments, in particular in large cities, that will force us as architects perhaps to become a bit more creative in our approach to housing. And in the same way, guys, we've seen a prominence of co-working spaces globally, today accounting for more holdings than traditional workspace in cities around the world. We are shifting towards alternative patterns in living spaces, for example, co-living typologies. Maria, if we can be a bit more specific for the Cypriot context, are we ready for such concepts? Are stakeholders discussing this?
Not really. I don't think they are. It's a very complex idea that I think takes us back to our first question. I think when you have co-working, cohabitation, that means you need to have the essential common spaces to support these ideas. And we're still thinking in terms of isolated projects. We're not thinking in terms of multi-use development, as I said before. If you have someone living in one room of an apartment, You have to give that person their common space, their outdoor space, to be able to function, to be able to support that idea. And we're just not there yet.
You mean we're not there culturally as well to accept
Yes.
that model? Yeah. Okay, and then that perhaps relates to what I wanted to ask Maria in a way, because lately we've observed a cultural shift in Cyprus. We've had an increased influx of many people from different cultures and backgrounds. Have you observed changes in the demands for housing or workspaces? And how do you anticipate future changes?
Okay. I would like first to make a statement regarding this, the cultural diversity.
Of course.
Cyprus, throughout history, was inhabited by numerous countries. Due to the location, in the junction of two continents, and was desirable through aeons by a lot of other countries for the location, for political or economical reasons. Our country was influenced in the culture, in the spoken language, in ethos, in everything, from Phoenicians, Persians, ancient Greece, Venetians, Franks, Turks, English. Influences from these civilizations can be found everywhere, even in architecture, and it's our history. So for me to say is that we're familiar with diversity in culture. It's my opinion. It's not like we are xenophobic or so on. Cyprus is familiar with many cultures and many nations.
Of course we are familiar, it's just we cannot deny
We
the
have
fact.
to adapt anyway to this. Okay, I'm not saying that we are the globalization and we have all the specific needs and we live in the exact way like somebody from wherever he's used to live, but we can adapt and we can also implement and the designs and the product according to the client's needs, but according also to Cyprus reality and regulations, because unfortunately, yes, we would like to have a free hand to design, but also we have the restrictions from the regulations which must be followed. And we are doing our best for that.
Okay. Costantino, I wanted you to share your thoughts on what the role of technology is in the design and provision of living and working spaces at the moment. In particular, are we discussing advancements in digital technology, smart building systems, AI? Are we considering the necessary infrastructure that would allow our buildings to operate in that manner?
We need to understand, I think, that technology was and is still a tool. We need to use it properly. Human is on the first, needs to be on the beginning, in the forefront, We need to understand how to use it properly. We don't need to rely on the technology. Of course, the integration of AI, of all of these technologies into the buildings and into the use of these buildings can, of course, improve everyday life. For example, because you don't need, a very simple thing that comes to my mind, you don't need how to properly use a machine. The AI can adapt and use it for yourself. But I don't think that we are, at this point, we are not 100% ready to say, okay, let's introduce it without thinking. Because, for example, for the today's technology, not the AI, but up to today, there has been some tries, but we don't seem able to fully integrate all these technologies in our architecture. But we come afterwards and we try to improve or squeeze them in with all the results that we see every day.
That's what I'm asking. Yes, Maria, please. Yeah.
And to continue to give you the pass for the next question is where emotional intelligence stands. Mm-hmm. And this is a question in general. Yep.
Of course. I mean, my question was targeting, perhaps because I'm aware that this is what we do at the moment. I mean, we build and then we're trying to kind of superimpose things on buildings and enforce them at a later stage. But globally, there are strategies that are preventing that from happening. They're considering, technological systems and opportunities well in advance, and they're becoming infrastructural provisions in the buildings. I know we're not there locally, but hopefully these are steps to be taken in the near future. Before we jump into what Maria has kind of hinted at, I want to pose a question to Konstantinos, because inevitably when one discusses the future of architecture, they have to place sustainability at the forefront. It's inevitable. However, sometimes we feel as sustainability is such an overarching concept that it's always useful to break it down into its key constituents. Can you please summarize that for us, Konstantinos?
Yes. We need, as a first step, we need to understand that all these things are, I'm going to try to make it a little bit easy, because it's easy actually, what we're called environmental design. And this environmental design stands in three main pillars. The first pillar is the most basic, the most fundamental one. It's the bioclimatic design, the passive approach to the design. How do we design the building in order to be able to adapt on its climate, to be part of the climate, to absorb the energy when needed, when give it out, not absorb it when it's not needed. This is the first step. The second step, and this is actually how the traditional architecture has been all these thousands of years, not only in Cyprus but all over the world. The second step is the energy efficient design, the use of the active systems that we design the building with a bioclimatic way, a passive way, and we cannot, of course, 100% sustain the building in terms of energy, in terms of all the needs of the building. So we come with active means, for example, with machinery, the HVAC, the AI, the photovoltaics or whatever, to try and fill the gap, fill all the remaining gap. And the third pillar is the ecological approach to the design, the things that we kindly kind of touched in the beginning regarding the materials, the materiality, and all this, and all the materials that are used to be sustainable in terms of their ecology and their effects on the environment itself. Okay,
thank you, Konstantinos. Are we doing enough though locally? Because to a certain degree, active integrative systems, that are integrated within the building fabric, they are quantifiable through current energy certification programs. However, bioclimatic strategies, they're not so easy to comprehend and embrace, yeah?
This is on us. This is on us as architects. Actually, we are the only ones, fortunately, that we are able to design a building in such a way, because, as you said, all the energy performance certification doesn't really doesn't care about the bioclimatics. So we need to implement it, and of course, it's on us to teach the client how to use this system, these simple systems. For example, it always comes to mind the thing that we design a building in this, for example, with large glazing in the south, and we go next to this building that we designed with trying to put all these two things together, and we see the shading devices closed, the shutters closed in the winter, because the curtains doesn't need to, we don't want to spoil the curtains. So we need to teach also to the client what these moves that we did, what actually mean, and how they can use it properly.
Yeah, you need an occupancy schedule, kind of communicated to the clients.
And here, the AI and all these things can come and help.
Okay, great. Now, I'll move on to a different subject, because obviously we cannot ignore the increasing number of high-rise development lately in Cyprus, and in particular, Limassol. And of course, our need to build high can be traced back to primeval needs, back to the Tower of Babel, almost. However, projects I brought lately have been revisiting the exact opposite, building horizontally rather than vertically, a typology termed as a ground scraper or a land scraper. Maria, what are the characteristics of such buildings?
They have to be pretty long. I think about, I mean, for it's a typology that, I think buildings that are essentially longer than about 300 meters are referenced as ground scrapers. Yeah, and they're not very tall, and it's not a new concept. I mean, a lot of companies built their ground scrapers in North America after the World War, when companies were beginning to abandon downtowns. Corbu had a big proposal for Algiers. There are some examples in England that are quite significant as part of the history of the typology. There's an example by Stephen Hall in China, Shenzhen, China, which is it's a great project. And what it essentially does, they refer to it as the horizontal skyscraper. And what it essentially does, it's lifting the building, creating a landscape underneath, and this landscape is accessible by the city itself. So again, we're going back to the idea of how these buildings, these ground scrapers, can encourage, interaction between the citizens, the residents, and the people working in these buildings themselves. And besides that, they're considered to be much more financially much more wise in terms of their construction, environmentally more sensible, and I think they came. I think they came to the forefront because there's been a couple of proposals. Google is building their headquarters in London, and it's that kind of typology. It's a very long building. They're recycling an old train station in New York City for their offices there, which again brings back the issue of recycling buildings. And if you're organizing a ground scraper, you can actually readapt older buildings to actually function that way versus skyscrapers, which I think they're detrimental to our cities.
That's quite interesting, actually, because if you think of this kind of horizontal expansion, let's say in the city, and the fact that you can allow a ground scraper to embrace an existing fabric and then continue, maybe it has a huge impact in the city. And this idea of perhaps can relate to 15-minute city concepts and polycentric city concepts. I understand you agree with that, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, one other reason why ground scrapers became popular is to be able to decentralize cities, essentially. And yeah, that's what they're doing. They're creating these cities, multiple city centers. I think they're combined with the idea of multi-use developments and corporations. I mean, that's the idea.
So it kind of ties back to the first discussion that we had on multi-users, and also necessarily they propose or they present opportunities for a different type of movement and flow systems, as opposed to the vertical singularity of a high-rise building.
There's actually quite a bit of research going on how you can be more effective with these buildings. Mm-hmm. And they're actually building streets going through these buildings sometimes, streets that are actually accessible. They feel like like a real street going through your building, which is, a totally different concept than skyscrapers.
Maria, you wanted
to very much like to be alive and experience such a city, to be honest with you. City flowing below the buildings, green area, pavement, and so on.
Or the building the line in Saudi Arabia.
Yes, but in Cyprus, how do we achieve that? How do we achieve that? Our size is small. The plots are small. I think this should go up to a higher level of urban design first.
Yeah, but we still think of building high as the thing to do. It's like we haven't done it and we want to get it out of the way. We want to do it.
We want to do it because we're coming back. I like Detroit. When Detroit did that, now it's our turn.
Yeah. But in all honesty, a few decades ago, it would have been inconceivable to think of such high-rise development in Limassol anyway. So, any new concept, I think, requires time to mature and assimilate and then kind of find a way to be introduced. Maybe we'll find these ground scrapers at a smaller scale. maybe they don't have to be half a kilometer length or whatever, but maybe the concept and the ideas.
Yes, this can be applied to let's say, the unified developments, which are bigger developments, and where the height is limited. I'm talking about the rules now.
I think you have the idea that, you know, all employees of a big company, whether it's a smaller scale in Cyprus, have access to the city in a different way than you would in any other.
Yes,
building.
we want to abandon the cars. We want to abandon the time travel for needing half an hour to travel 1 kilometer in the cities. Exactly. But this again, it's a state decision regarding what they are doing regarding transportation, which is critical. So we have more effective and sustainable cities. We have a easier everyday life. People can find, they can live, they can work. I'm against from the motto, work from home. I am fond and fan of the never mixed business with pleasure. Home is home, work is work, but it would be much easier when we travel 15 minutes, let's say. So again, this is about the strict zoning we have in Cyprus. This is residential strictly, this is commercial strictly, and if you cannot, let's say, 20% in some cases of residence. So
that's why we need some horizontal zoning.
Yes, I am with you. Yes, and the
that's
change
a
of
part to be able to implement all these kinds of projects.
Yes.
You know, jump from one plot to the other. Well,
yes.
That's why
it's time to do it
because
they are trying. They are trying, the state makers, the policy makers. But I think that we should put Control Alt Delete in the previous planning system and start anew with the vision for the future and what we want to leave behind us.
For all these projects to be actually implemented, you have to be able to allow public access to a big part of the project.
It's part of the ownership then.
Yeah, exactly. That's where it falls apart here.
And that is why it's in China, because there's no ownership. I think it's all state. Anyway, we're dreaming. It's our role to dream for you.
So, I mean, necessarily, our planning system is quite slow at picking up changes and responding to needs and desires. But because there is so much pressure on understanding a city and improving sustainability and allowing cities to be resilient and stand in time. Perhaps they'll have to act fast because we've seen such immediate actions in London, for example. They had very strict regulations, but they upped their game and they changed everything like in a few months period because they understood the primary necessity of doing so. So, Constantino, because I've just mentioned London, London is considered a pretty resilient city. Can you define, can you trace some attributes that contribute to a city being livable and alive and resilient? And is that applicable in Cypriot cities? Are our cities resilient?
In their current form, I would say that they're not. What I would take from London or any other example that differentiates itself from us, it's the density. We have spread cities. We have at some points low building factors, which means that the density itself doesn't allow, for example, one thing that comes to mind that colleagues very well put before here for the ground squares regarding the 15-minute city and the transportation costs or energy spent for these all these connections, when a good planning, a good master planning of all our cities can really lead to some better examples. And I think the key factor here is the consistency of the authorities, the consistency regardless each government, regardless each stakeholder that comes and goes at times, to be consistent on a very specific master plan that needs to be the same and needs to be adaptable to the needs, just adaptable to the needs, not change the whole master plan every time that something comes up or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just seeing at the time we have 10 minutes left, so I'll try to accelerate slightly the discussion and maybe turn the discussion to a different kind of path. And Maria, kind of reflecting on where our profession stands at the moment. There has been criticism that the job of an architect has been sometimes, unfortunately, reduced to an architect designing a facade or the exterior of the building, sometimes completely disconnected from program and the interior. Are we dehumanizing architecture? Is it time that we shift our attention to meaningful human experience?
You know, as architects are weird. We want the applaud, we want the bravo. We're expecting what we design to stand out, and it's his, it's hers, wow. And kind of along that road, yes, I believe we forgot that people are not living on the facades, are living on the cities, of course, and you have to have a nice city. But most of the time, either working or living, they are inside the house, or in the office, or in the museum, and what is the human experience? What are the obstacles? So we have to be more detail-oriented regarding the layouts of a small house, even a 30 square meters house, with no waste of space, and revisit our past where they were saying during the 60s, 50s, I don't remember, form follows function, but okay, they should get married at one point, form and function. So this is it. We're designing for people, for human experience. You have to be very prepared about that. And not design for our ego.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, that's a very important statement, and I truly advocate that as well. However, when you're dealing with projects which are not community-based, they're not affordable housing, because in those kind of projects, you tend to use strategies like participatory design. You get the opinion of people prior to the commencement of the design process. But when you operate, let's say, with projects where a developer or an investor provides high-end housing on workspaces, how can you overcome the generic user concept and make it human-centric and human-specific?
Who will be the inhabitants? Humans, again, yes. You should pay more attention to the detail, again. On the layout of the building, of course, you can... I'm not talking about doing ugly architecture or just brutalism or whatever. We need to take into account who they are living or working in the specific space, the human experience, what they are going to feel. It's irrelevant, I think, with the budget. Mm-hmm. We should address each project as a unique project. Either it's a small one or it's a big one.
Mario, you wanted to add something?
Well, I think essentially what we've been talking about so far, you know, with multi-use developments and ground scrapers and whatnot, I think essentially what these projects are trying to do is humanize the user. Yeah, I mean that's the intention. That's why we're talking about these projects. You know, form a sense of community, as I said before. Abandon the car. You know, get up and walk to work. You know, have things accessible to you. You know, just making your life easier. I think that's humanizing. That's not. You know, we don't have to do too much about it. It's just very basic concepts.
Okay, so the next thing that we cannot really ignore when we discuss about the future is, and I'll direct my question to Marius. We have evidence in the past few decades, you know, faster-paced advancement in construction technology and material innovation. I mean, on one hand, we may have modular prefabricated construction that kind of streamlines processes and efficiency. On the other hand, we have the other extreme where we can literally build anything, bespoke, complex geometries, when incorporating new CAD/CAM techniques like 3D printing and bioengineering materials, etc. And I think we can fairly say that the majority of building practice in Cyprus, we're still using quite primitive means. How do you see that changing in the near future?
Using primitive means doesn't mean you're creating bad architecture.
No, absolutely. I'm not suggesting that. Yeah.
I mean,
I'm an architect too. I wouldn't do that to myself.
Doesn't necessarily tie with technology, but that's another issue. Essentially, we're a small place. You know, our GDP is quite small. You know, you have to be able to afford these buildings. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when we started the practice, you couldn't import these technologies quite easily. Now you can. You can import the expertise, and you can actually import the technology quite easily if you have the budget. It's all a matter of budgeting, basically. These buildings, you have to find the right investors, and you have to find the right purpose, and which is going to pay back at the end of the day. If there's no market here for payback, then nobody's going to invest in these buildings if they're not getting back what they're investing, basically.
Oh no, absolutely. But there is a counter argument that the more you embrace and introduce some of these construction techniques, obviously, this is how the market works, there will not necessarily be expensive solutions. They may actually help with the more affordable solutions in the near future. But I think the problem with Cyprus is just making that jump. And it relates, as you said, to the scale and to the sort of scope within which we operate. Okay, because I'm looking at the clock, I think I would just, yes. We are the last, but I think there's a party at 6 o'clock, so we don't want to eat away time from the party. But I would probably just go around and see if you have a closing statement or a remark you'd like to add without me directing you. So, Constantino.
I would say that all the things that were said here in this panel actually making the human the center of all the efforts. We need to understand that we don't build, we don't design for ourselves, as Maria said before very correctly, but we build for the users, and the users are not just the users that are going to use the building for the next 10 years, but probably for the next 50 or whatever years. So we need to understand and respect the human being first, and then try to put our ego and whatever else obstacles in our backs and continue with that.
Thank you. Maria.
I stole something from Sir Norman Foster, and I want to read it. It's important to learn from the past. The lessons of history are important. If you'd like to look far ahead, first look far back, and then be aware that you are designing for the present, but you are also designing for the future, which is unknown. The future is uncertain, making it crucial for designers to create adaptable and sustainable structures. By incorporating lessons from the past, architects can ensure their designs remain functional and aesthetically pleasing, regardless of future changes. The approach fosters a balance between tradition and innovation, ultimately leading to enduring and impactful architecture.
Okay, very inspirational. Marios?
I think what's happening in architecture lately, I mean, in the last 5 or 10 years, I think there's a big shift from signature buildings to actually buildings that are actually more human in how we can actually perceive them and utilize them and inhabit them. Whether these are flexible buildings, whether these are recycled buildings, and there's some great examples. I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, there was this project that won the Mies Award. It was a 60s project that was renovated, 530 apartments, renovated in a brilliant way. And I think that there's a big shift going on, and I'm just hoping that we can just sort of jump onto that somehow. Sort of actually catch up with what's happening versus just still trying to do the old thing.
Right, so I think we've kind of reached the end of this session. Can we have a couple of questions from the audience, if there are any? I think we're okay. Yes, please.
Hello, okay, works. So I've got a couple of questions, if that's okay. One is towards the high-rise, if you can speak to that. In the UK, there's something called the building control, but there's a set of regulation and a third party that's coming to inspect. Long story short, is this building safe? How can we mature this market to know and demand safe buildings? That's one. And two, if we go all out and we design and deliver neighborhoods instead of high-rises, what makes, I've heard a couple of you, they touched on this, make it humane and make it, have a nursery. How do you make a community? How do you make a neighborhood that people want to live in? What makes a difference? What's the X factor?
Okay, the first question to somebody. Yeah. Just to rephrase the first question, you've asked about high-rise buildings and how we ensure that these buildings are safe locally.
I spoke about the high-rise, but it's more or less everything because building control doesn't exist here.
Right. Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Okay. Clear. So it's about building control during the construction or post-construction stage of a project in Cyprus, like it happens in the UK, for example. So how do we know our buildings are safe?
The question?
Yeah.
You get inspection from the fire prevention department. You get certificates for the materials used that are fire preventing, yes. You get inspection from the checkers, what is the name? For the lifts. And you get inspection from the authorities if you did build it according to the plans and the specifications. And then you get the final approval. For sure, fire prevention department, as I understand, looking at other projects abroad, they are very strict in Cyprus. And they should inspect the building before giving the final approval. It's mandatory, an obligation of the owner. Is this a question about that, or about the earthquakes and the...
I think, sorry, if I can, so I think the discrepancy here is that we do have building control in a way in Cyprus. What we don't have building regulations, for example, in that kind of strict manner that you find in the UK. And like the fire brigade, it becomes more of a personal one-off negotiation with the fire brigade. The demands are there and they're quite strict. It's just you don't have this unified document that encompasses all the regulation in one. I think this is what we're lacking in Cyprus. But I don't think safety is compromised. That's my personal
not compromise
opinion.
Safety. It's not compromise. Even if you make the cladding in a Lucobond, let's say a material, you have to provide to the fire, for the fire inspection, the regulations. If I recall, there was a fire in London.
In Grenfell Tower.
Yes, and the material that was used for the cladding was not fire rated according to the plans, correctly? Also, I went through the drawings because I was impressed. Okay, it wasn't so high-rise. It was 30 floors, I don't recall. The fire escape exits, they weren't like the ones they demand from us. I mean, over 6-floor building in Cyprus, you should have an exterior fire escape staircase. They don't give you a permit to build. So I think they are a little bit more strict with us in Cyprus regarding that things.
And can we have a go at the second question.
The second, I mean, I'm assuming the second question refers to multi-use developments in cities and
Community building,
Right.
correct?
and I mean,
I was referring to NES and aptixis, residential NES and aptixis. How do you make it feel comfortable, cozy,
well,
welcoming?
essentially these things are things you're building or developing within a very specific context, the city itself. I mean, you have to, it's not something you're developing from scratch, all right? You're trying to improve an area. So essentially, you really have to be very well aware of what's there already and what needs to be fixed. And you have to be able to, integrate what you're proposing quite effectively with what's there and what's missing. So we're not referring to building something from scratch somewhere out in the middle of nowhere. So that's why design and design development is critical in these projects. You have to do it right. You have to get it right for people to come in.
And the needs are different in different place. For example, if within the city, let's say, context, it's different needs. If it's in the outskirts, it's a different need. The most important thing, as Mario said, is to respect what's around it. This is the first thing that you need to do, and after that, depends on the specific needs of which development.
In a project we did back many years ago, when we were doing a νέα οικιστική ανάπτυξη, a unified residential project with 55 apartments, we wanted to give back to that community the essence of old ages when we were young, without cars, playing around. So we prevent the cars circulating in the area. We created many pavements for children to play. We even have the public green area, which was supposed to be given to the public. That's for the regulations. Pardon, the green area went through our project, infiltrated
into the
our
project
for our benefit. So yes, actually when I go there, I see the green. It's not like we are stuck one to another. And yes, you have the feel of the sense of the community and other people around you, young couples and so on. Small details.
Thank you. Can we take maybe one more question? Are we okay with that, organizers? Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Hello, it's about fire regulations. We're seeing new buildings. There's a very relatively strict fire regulations to approve them. But in old buildings, which are probably more fire-prone, nobody cares about it. Well, so far, they not have emergency lights. They don't seem to have things. Can you clarify, explain, say something about it? I mean, I think this is my idea because I go into old buildings and I don't see, even emergency lights, they not have it. Nobody bothers about it.
Okay, there is no inspection of all buildings, but once you are doing a renovation of that said building or a listed building, then you have to upgrade the fire prevention and go follow the regulations. And actually, we have a conflict with the fire department regarding the renovations of listed buildings and on all buildings where they demand exterior staircases, let's say in the center of Nicosia, in the old town Nicosia, where all the traditional houses and the listed buildings are connected to each other, and they want to have an exterior stair leading to where? To where? And they don't take into consideration that problem. But let's say about an old residential building like we had on the 60s and 70s that we still see. The open staircases, small lifts. Yes, I understand your concern, but we have multiple users, multiple owners, empty apartments, and the regulations, of course, they are a little bit flexible regarding that when they decide to make a renovation. Unfortunately, they are not doing something while they're like that.
Don't you think they should do something without the renovation, like to go and
I
have
think
inspection everywhere and
yes.
at least some basic rules?
Monitoring of the built environment, monitoring of the new building environment.
This is a huge discussion that
It's a huge
extends beyond
discussion
fire
about the
regulations,
country.
because in Limassol in particular, with evidence balconies falling off in the middle of the street or pavements. So it is a matter of control of the authority of the municipality, being aware and listing and recording potential hazards in the city. So I agree with you, but we don't have that regulation at the moment, but it's something that is being discussed, absolutely. We have to end it. Thank you very much to my panelists for the very interesting discussion. Thank you to you.